morning or afternoon or evening. Good time zones. How's that? Good time zones, everyone. Thank you for coming in. If you're coming in now, if you're coming in later, if you're watching the VOD, I appreciate you. Shoot me a hi, hello in the Discord if you're on the Discord or on Blue Sky. I think I have the link on my page for Blue Sky in the About section. If I don't, same username everywhere. Always everywhere. It's always Wayward Bard. If you look for me online, it's going to be under Wayward Bard. But if you're new here, my name is Wayward Bard, and I go by Bard usually, or Birdie, or Bee, all of which I will answer to. I am currently alone in the house because my spouse is out doing errands and stuff, so I figured since I'm on my own for a bit, I figured I would pop in and start yapping about stuff and try and get on this whole getting back into the action of, streaming again and things, and talking about stuff that has been on my mind the past few days, namely how much over the weekend I'm exhausted by work. So I have a day job as a dispatcher for a shuttle service in my area. And my shifts are only on the weekends, which sounds great, right? But they're 12 hours long. So I get in at 8 a.m., I go home at 8 p.m. There's the commute to and from, and that can be a little exhausting because it's an additional hour and a half waking up and trying to get my brain going at 6 in the morning my time. And I'm not a morning person. I've never been a morning person. When I was in school, I never wanted to be in morning classes. When I was in high school and junior high and all that stuff, I hated mornings. I had to pretty significantly, oh, freaking A. Why is that so ugly? There's going to be an ad break already? Jeez. Okay. Well, if you're here because the ads are running in the VOD, because obviously there's not going to be anything in the VOD. I'm just going to yap a little bit more. Because it's not important. Everything I'm about to go is just me yapping. I'm just yapping out loud. That's the awesome part about, doing a stream, getting used to yapping out loud about your thoughts and your interests, maybe to an audience of one, maybe to an audience of none, hoping somebody will pop in and say hello. So I have been pretty consistently for the past couple months watching a Minecraft SMP, multiplayer SMP, which I feel immediately I should correct my own speech, because SMP is supposed to be survival multiplayer. So to say multiplayer SMP is a little redundant, isn't it? So a Minecraft SMP about a social deduction game called about using the guise of vampires. Typically, I should start by saying that I don't usually watch SMPs. I'm more of a single content creator type watcher for a lot of reasons. My hello, Sugar Fly McQueen. Nice of you to pop in. Thank you so much for joining me. I'm just rambling. If you stick around, awesome. If you don't stick around, that's fine too. If you decide to lurk, I love me some lurkers. Thank you so much for popping in. So I'm kind of all over the place. I'm sorry. I started rambling because the ad break was on and I didn't want to lose any possible interaction stuff. So I'll try and get back to what I was going on, and then I'll circle back to talking about VampiresSMP again, because I've got a lot to say about it, as the project is over now, and there's just so much to unpack and theory talk and stuff. I'm not hoping by any chance that any of the creators join in my chat. It would be so cool, but I know better than to hope. But anyway, so working on the weekends, 12-hour shifts, another hour and a half, waking up in the morning, another 30, 40 minutes of commute on the way back, assuming I don't get a ride home. So my weekends are very long and very tiresome, and I am so glad when they're over. And I usually spend the day after the weekend shift kind of just in recovery. My spouse is currently at therapy and doing errands, so it's just me in the house for now, and I thought I'd go live and yap. Anyway, I usually spend a good long amount of time on the weekends, either watching videos, watching my friends on Twitch, or what is the... Sorry, the blur is being a little weird on the camera right now. Or watching friends on stream, or writing. I've been trying to get back into writing again. That's something that I haven't been doing a lot lately because I've been kind of scatterbrained and just trying to survive the day. It can be difficult at times because of just how much stuff is going on in daily life. But I had found vampiressmp because of Infinite Drift. I need to... Hi, Sai! Thanks for joining us. I'm going to shout out Infinite Drift for anybody who doesn't know about Infinite Drift. She is a fantastic, phenomenal... I hope this is the right handle. If it's not, I'm going to be mad at myself. Nope, that's not the right handle. I wish I could delete comments without making things worse. So let me try that one more time. There we go. I found... Hi, Cozy. Thank you so much for the lurk. I found vampiressmp through Drift. I've been watching Drift content for probably close to a year or more. Probably more at this point. And I used to watch Drift's SMP Castaways, which had a bunch of the girlies in it. Frog Crafting, who was my OG content creator that I watched. Frog Crafting, Brickella, Severus, or Savaris. I always forget the proper pronunciation. Oh gosh. I think Maggie Bites made an appearance, but she was not in the SMP. A couple other people. Why am I forgetting everybody's names? Anyway, that was fun. I loved watching Castaways. And if you're interested in watching like a fun, silly, building focused SMP that's already done, so you don't have to worry about any cliffhangers. Not that I can think that there were any cliffhangers. Not the way vampiressmp was. Vampiressmp was full of cliffhangers. Like it was compelling entertainment, and it was really hard to have to wait for the next episodes and to have to push through the hiatus between a couple times where either there was server problems or they were at TwitchCon. Having to wait it reminded me so much of... Let me mute my stuff so it doesn't make all kinds of beeps while I'm doing this. It reminded me so much of when I used to watch cable television and having to wait between episodes. I am reminded once again that the hyperfixation is real. I've had dedicated hyperfixations where all I can do is focus my 100% of my energy on whatever it is that I'm hyperfixating at the time. In the history, it was Star Wars, it was Supernatural, it was a couple TV shows that I used to watch. It was a couple franchises that I may or may not be interested in talking about anymore. I was really into Supernatural for a very, very, very long time. I immediately got into it when the show first started airing. And I kept with it almost to the end of the show's run. I think in the last 4 or 5 seasons, I had kind of mentally checked out, and there was a whole bunch of real life stuff happening that kind of kept me from properly being invested in it anymore, at least while it was live going on. But I definitely spent huge swaths of my time talking about it with other people, doing role plays online, watching video analyses and other stuff like that. I'd gone to conventions, I'd gotten photographs with cast. I developed some of the longest lasting friendships through watching that television show, even after those people also ended up leaving the television show, leaving the interest in the television show. I still have developed friendships with them. Same thing with book series that I used to read, people that I became friends with through that book series. I don't talk as much with people these days, but I still consider them deep personal friendships, and I will love them always and forever. And I've also had a couple people I've become friends with online through video games that I really enjoyed, uh, namely Cozy. Cozy and I met through Stardew. And we both, because of us having some flavor of neurodivergency, are hyperfixated on specific video games, specifically Stardew. That's how we met. We met in a Facebook group looking for co-players, and we were pretty consistently always online at the same time, so we were able to play a lot together. And I mean, I can only speak for myself, but Cozy's my bestie. Cozy's my bestie, and I'm so grateful to have had the opportunity to meet Cozy because of Stardew. And we have so much in common. It's really awesome to be able to have a friend that I talk to pretty regularly again because of shared interests. And that's another really big thing. Like, I find, for me as a neurodivergent person, finding somebody who shares my special interest is like the perfect launching point for a friendship. Um, which brings me back to Vampires SMP. I haven't really made a whole lot of friends yet. I want to say yet because of Vampires SMP, but I have developed some casual conversational friends with people that I watch on other streamers' accounts. Like, a couple people in frog crafting streams I know them and I speak to them pretty regularly. I know a couple people from Infinite Drift streams that I talk to pretty regularly in chat. We don't necessarily talk out of chat so much yet. I'd love to, but I also know that people have lives, and I use a big air quotes here, as an adult, as a mature person who works and has a job and personal life crap. Thank you. Me too, buddy. Um, Sometimes it can be difficult now as a person who has an offline life, whereas when I was younger, I mostly it was only school and it was online stuff with other people online, and that was it. And because of how I grew up talking to people in school, I had a less of a belief, like a strong held belief, that these people were going to be long lasting friends, because I grew up moving around all the time and not really being able to maintain in person friendships, because I just didn't trust that we were going to stay in the same place for very long because of my family and my parents. But I don't want to go into that. That's a whole conversation at a different time that is less fun and polite and stuff, and I don't want to go into that. So I'm just not going to do that. I'm going to come back once again to what I started talking about in the stream. I got into Vampires SMP because of Drift, and Drift didn't end up being my main POV that I followed. I feel a little embarrassed to admit that, but I found myself immediately drawn to the perspective, the POV for Owen, who was played by Orange Juice TV. He's a very, I guess he's a very very well-known content creator. Shit, I messed that up. Let me try that again. I can't copy the text for some reason in this app. That's stupid. Just don't mind me taking a couple seconds of silence as I try to type in this terribly. There we go. Did that work? Did it? It doesn't look like it might have worked. I might have fucked it up again. Oh, it didn't even go through. Hang on. There we go. No, that's not right either. Oh, maybe it is. Maybe it is. Anyway, I started following Owen's POV, and then I found myself like just really invested in this storyline for that character. Thank you, Cozy. Enjoy your short little lurk. And take meds. Oh yeah, people, take your meds. Who hasn't taken their meds? Go take your meds. If you haven't had a sip of water yet, sip, sip, slurp, slurp. If you haven't had a little stretch, do a little stretch. Crack them bones, untrippify. So I started watching Owen's POV, and pretty quickly that became my main POV. And then I started watching people whose POV intersected with Owen's a lot. So I started watching a little bit of Pyro sites. I started watching a little bit of Shovel. I started watching a little bit of Lagundo. I ended up really, really liking Lagundo also. So those were my two POVs that I watched. I watched a little bit of Avid. I watched a little bit of Zombie Cleo. All of these names are new to me, but are not new to the content creator sphere on Twitch and on YouTube. But I was really invested in Owen's POV, like super, super invested. Yeah, I know. So I know a lot of people talk about Hermitcraft. I'm not going to say that Hermitcraft is intimidating, but they are more of a build heavy, silly sort of SMP, to my understanding. Whereas Vampires SMP was a lot more story driven, and I think maybe that reflects me and my style of entertainment that I enjoy. Like I used to do a lot of online RP. I have watched a lot of story, like narrative story, plot driven television. So in both of those cases, like and I also really like book series. Like I'll read a lot of like single novels that are complete in one book, that sort of thing. But I really enjoy reading a series, and I'll keep reading a series until there aren't any left. And if there's any sort of spin-offs from that series, I will usually end up watching the spin-offs or reading the spin-offs also. So story-driven content is something that I personally really enjoy and have always enjoyed. And I am, because I spend so much time terminally online, getting away from cable television stories and getting more into online narrative stories has been something I'm, what's the word I want to use? Gravitating towards. So that's why I got super invested in Vampires SMP. I am sad because there's no more content because the series came to an end, but I'm also satisfied because it ended naturally. It didn't keep going forced. That's something I feel happens a lot in modern commercially pro, uh, produced television and movies and stuff, is that they become these money making ventures, and people end up just pushing them past the point of coherence, and it becomes really convoluted and muddy water. And I feel like that's why a lot of people will fall away from those types of things. And also the same thing with things getting prematurely canceled. Like, they prove to not have the immediate financial return that a producer will want, so they cancel them, not realizing that maybe uh, because the topic, the entertainment, might have been niche to start, or had fewer well-known names. That's a whole separate topic we'll get to in a second. Um, but maybe the draw would have taken a little longer, but it would have resulted in really strong bonded um, fans of the show who would have like super duper committed to the content and everything attached to it. And you can see that with things like Firefly. Firefly developed this humongous fan base. Like, even after things about Joss Whedon has come out, people are just still really invested in the characters and the story and the chemistry between the characters and the actors, and shipping, which is its own thing. That's content for another time. I feel like I have less popular feelings about shipping than some people. Um, and maybe that has a little bit to do more with the fact that I value people as individuals, and I'm not so motivated by romance and sexual stuff. I don't want to push too many people away, though, by bringing up those types of things. That'll be a different stream. Maybe we'll have a talk about that in a different stream. But um, so getting back to vampiressmp, getting super invested in Owen's POV and all of the people who directly interacted with him, all the way until the end of his storyline and ultimately the end of the series. It was really, really phenomenal. I give so much praise to the content creators and the stories they developed, because it was unscripted. Like, that's probably one of the most impressive parts about all of it, is that it was unscripted. And granted, I feel like that is a very popular thing for RP to do. You don't script it, because otherwise it doesn't feel natural the same way. But the problem with uh, unscripted storytelling is that it suddenly I find personally, as someone who used to do that you become really attached to the story that you're telling. And there can be elements of what I have called, and I'm sure other people have also referred to, as character bleed. It's something that actors also can sometimes feel when they get super invested in their characters. The emotions that you brought into the scene can sometimes linger afterward. It can be difficult to just like compartmentalize that stuff and put it away. And I think maybe that's something that happens with people who become fans of things too. They become so invested in things that it can be hard for them to compartmentalize their feelings from the content and what the storyteller is trying to say. Um, and that's all. I think I could probably spend an entire hour plus talking about that. So if I'm going to be on here for longer than 45 minutes, maybe I'll do that. I'm hoping to be on it for at least an hour, because by then my spouse will be back and we can go about the day. But anyway, so I had started writing let's call it an essay, because I have been running into people who have enjoyed the content, some younger folk specifically. And a lot of people are like really super focused on the romance elements, to the point where they're like, I'm going to write fix it fic about it to make up for the fact that my ship sank. Welcome back, Z. My ship sank, or the character I loved died, and we didn't get any more story about that character and stuff like that. And admittedly, I did a lot of that myself back when I was involved in fandoms. So I get it, I understand. But I think also a lot of stuff I wish had been presented to me was that it's okay to feel those things, but it's also okay to appreciate the fact that it's done, and appreciate that the story went in a different direction, and to not take it uh, as seriously in that way. Like, it's important to appreciate what the storytellers are telling. And that's, I think, also a whole separate thing. I've had conversations with, as a person who has a bachelor's degree in English literature, talking about that kind of stuff is something that I did a lot of while I was in school. And stuff that I've done a lot of with people outside of school who also have the same degree as me, or have also been in literary circles talking about that kind of stuff. We spend a lot of time analyzing and doing what's the word? Not just analyzing, but oh my god. It's going to take me a second to find the word that I'm looking for, but anyway, I don't want to derail myself. Not every, and this was the point I was trying to make in one of the forums, one of the Discord servers. A lot of people were complaining how the story didn't have a happy ending, or that certain characters weren't redeemed, or that the plot maybe didn't go the direction that wanted it to go. And I know that doesn't take away from the fact that they enjoyed it, but maybe their enjoyment was preemptively stifled because it didn't turn out the way they wanted. And I found myself really impassioned with wanting to talk about how stories don't need to have happy endings to be impactful and get a thought across, and that sort of thing. And that not every character needs to have a redemption arc to tell a good story, to provide good narrative. This is what happens when I don't even write down my thought points before I stop talking about things. Not every character has to have a redemption arc or a positive moral to provide a good resolution, a good story, to affect the plot in such a way that it ultimately becomes an enjoyable experience. Like, there are some pretty phenomenal examples of stories that do not have happy endings, and I want to say, like, the horror genre is especially good for that. Not a whole lot of horror films have a happy ending. A lot of them end on a terribly sad note. The Smile and Smile 2 movies immediately jump to mind. They do not have happy endings. They do not have uh, happy resolutions. The bad guy wins. The bad thing happens, and you're left going, "Holy crap! What do I do now?" You don't see a lot of people in those fandoms writing fix it fic and talking about how they wish the character had a happy ending. It's very, very specifically like, oh, that happened to that character and that was hard to watch, or that was really thrilling and compelling, or whatever the case may be. Thriller as a separate genre does have a tendency to have better resolutions, not necessarily always happy ones. But they definitely do have a tendency to end on a somewhat lighter note and less of a heavy note. But drama doesn't always have a happy ending. Melodrama even more so. And I feel like VampiresSMP was a perfect mix of melodrama and horror. Maybe not gruesome and gory like genuine quote unquote horror does in different forms of media. There aren't a whole lot of PG horror movies. Um, and if they are, it has to be done a very specific way to still like inspire a sense of fear and dread. I think the Mithrigan franchise is a good version of that. Megan, with 3, that's why I say Mithrigan, because they wanted to capture an audience of younger adults to watch it, or older teens, young adults. So they kind of dialed back the gruesome stuff, the horror stuff, and then they of course released an unrated version, which is hilarious. But that can be said about Minecraft content. Minecraft as a game doesn't have a lot of gore or deathy type stuff. Like there isn't blood. That kind of stuff isn't something that's really there in the vanilla game. You can find mods that will affect it, mods that'll add things like guns, mods that'll add things like gore and death. There's illusions to it with the zombies and with the skeletons and that kind of stuff, but you don't really see blood and guts and gore the same way you would if you were playing a more mature game. If you were playing a game that wasn't marketed to young people but happens to be played by a lot of older adults in addition to young people. So with a topic like vampires, which is a genre a genre trope that is very known for having gruesome and horrific elements to it, to see it being presented in a family friendly style is fascinating to me. That sound is my dishwasher. If it's coming up on the mic, I feel like it must be. Oh yeah, it definitely is. So we got another ad break coming in. It's going to be 90 seconds. If you are still watching this before the 90 seconds start, or whatever the case may be, please feel free to get up, get some water, get some stretching, take your meds if you haven't taken your meds yet. Do all that stuff. You don't have to watch the ad, please. Please don't watch the ad. I'm still going to get credit for you all being present anyway. And if you're in chat, if you're in stream and you're lurking, that's awesome. But Twitch has a new algorithm problem now where you have to respond, say something in chat, use a redeem or something to be counted. So if you're able to do that, I do have a point redeem for that. If not, just like a lurk is fine. Don't feel like you have to, though. It's fine. All of it's fine. Do whatever feels comfy. Just gonna ramble a little bit more. I had what did I have? I had a snack when I woke up after I ate the leftovers from my Chinese lunch the other day. The thing's broken. Chili lemon peanuts. Limon peanuts, which is Spanish for lime. That was my morning snack. I need some tea. I drank some milk, but it's not tea. I need tea. So I'll probably make that in a little bit. Goodness me. Yeah. There we go. Ads are over. Welcome back from the ads, everybody. So I find, especially with things like younger horror. Hi, Azzy. Thank you so much for joining us. So nice to see you. Thank you for joining us. We're talking about genre stuff and Minecraft and things like that. Thank you, darling. It's so nice. It's so nice to see your name and your face and be appreciated. So with an RP in a game that is marketed as being family friendly, about yes, you can have some of my tea, darling. In a game that is marketed as being family friendly to content creators who spend a lot of time trying to produce family-friendly stuff so that they're able to capture a large audience, and not just a limited audience. Sometimes you have to mix in genres, which is what I feel like Vampires SMP really did well. There were elements of the horror genre and the thriller genre, but there were also a lot of interpersonal relationships, and romantic elements and things like that made you invested in the story in different ways. And as soon as you introduce romance as a genre, then there becomes like different mindsets than just horror. You find a lot of people doing shipping stuff. You find a lot of people who become super invested in the romantic elements. But with it being a horror genre, you have to be ready for the fact that the romance will go horribly wrong. The romance will be, in, as the younger folk call it these days, doomed. Um, Stuff like Twilight. Ugh, don't even get me started on Twilight. I don't want to talk about Twilight. Let's just pretend I didn't say anything about Twilight just now and go on to what I'm trying to say. Um, you don't see a lot of happy endings in horror. Like I started saying, you don't. It's just not something that happens. And that's definitely the case with Vampires SMP. Pretty much every single possible romantic relationship in the SMP ended on a horribly, horribly awful note. Heart-wrenchingly so. The only one I can think of that maybe ended on a slightly positive note was the relationship between Pearl and Cleo. While they never openly have them be in a romantic relationship, it's implied. There's a lot of implied romantic elements to it. But you could also see it from a romantic, asexual lens too, I feel like. And part of me is kind of glad that they kind of kept it that way. The relationship was very strong without being soupy goopy, fluttery, romantic-y stuff. There was elements of both Pearl and Cleo to each other being protective and being showing concern and wanting the other to be safe and valuing each other's perspectives and thoughts and feelings and opinions and stuff like that. But there were also really, really strong friendships between some of the characters that interacted. I didn't watch every single point of view. I will probably try and do that over the next couple of weeks while I suffer the fallout of the series being done. But I know from observation, discussions in the fandom circles, that like there were strong relationships between the militia members, Mr. M and Ren, and Martin and Apo. They all had really close bonds with each other, and Lagundo also had really close personal relationships with Cleo and with Pearl and some of the other members, but specifically Cleo and Pearl and Owen. And I was super, super invested in the relationship between Owen and Lagundo specifically, because it wasn't even necessarily that it was built on romance directly. I feel like a lot of it might have been implied, that it could definitely be seen through that lens. But what I actually ended up seeing a lot more was the fact that Owen was still deeply committed to the failed relationship that happened between him and his mentor, Lewis. With Lewis having died, the relationship kind of reverts back to being um, unrequited, and not in your typical way of being unrequited, but in a sense of, I feel love for another person, but I cannot have that love being reciprocated for me, specifically in Owen's case because his mentor has passed. Horrifically, in a gruesome, awful way, that we don't get to see a lot of, because it is one of those things. It becomes a question of, Can I show this in a family-friendly manner without turning people away from it? Which I think Owen, the content creator, does very well, mostly by focusing on Owen, the vampire's reaction and response to this horrific event happening to them. Owen goes through a lot of survivor's guilt. He goes through a lot of attachment problems. Um, and his attachment problems are directly related to how he had been treated for the majority of his life. There are hints that he did not have a relationship with his parents. He may have even been abandoned after a certain age. He definitely was neglected. He had contracted what most people perceived as being a very contagious, welcome back, Sai, being a really contagious disease. And because people were worried about being infected by this disease. Hi, Alan. Thank you so much for the raid. Hi, Raiders. How are you today? For those of you who don't know me, my name is Wayward Bard. I go by Bard, Bead, or Bead, Bard, Bee, Birdie, etc. I am a variety streamer with a literary lean. I am slowly getting back into the streaming space again after being gone for a very long time. Thank you, Alan. Thank you for sharing your community with me. Of course. If you have to raid and run, I completely understand. Please take care of yourself first and foremost. Have a stretch, have a sip, have a snack. If you have to raid and run, I get it. I think I might have already said that, but you get the idea. Do a big stretch, all those things. Lurk if you need to lurk. Getting back to the content at hand, I have to trace back my steps because I got all distracted. So Owen's character goes through a lot of forced isolation, and that forced isolation makes him resentful, makes him bitter. All of those feelings compound further and become anger and anger as a way of slowly building into rage. But because he's not really given an outlet for those feelings, he just kind of puts them in a bottle and stews in them. It just becomes something that's all he allows himself to feel. That's all he allows himself to experience. He doesn't have personal relationships with other people. And he isn't shown. I hope things have been going well for you. In case I already know you've been going through some transitions lately. Thank you so much, Alan. I do appreciate it. Because Owen's character doesn't get kindness shown to him, doesn't have a lot of interpersonal relationships, you can also tell, if I recall correctly, I always forgot what that meant, but thank you. Yes, you are correct though. Because his character is forced into this isolation, he believes that he gives himself permission, big air quotes there, to be alone. But in doing so, he doesn't recognize or admit to developing this really deep, intense loneliness. I can relate to that personally, and I think that's maybe why I really invested in the character. I had been forced into isolation most of my life through neglect, through moving around and not really having a lot of personal relationships, through not really having close relationships with my extended family because we moved a lot also. So being forced to be alone and becoming really lonely and craving human connection. With Owen, his feelings are more resentful because he feels he has been purposefully ostracized by the community at large, for me personally, it was more that I just never really developed a good way to interface with other people. And admittedly, I was bullied. And I didn't become angry, resentful about being bullied. I just became fearful and hesitant to befriend people because I was too worried that they would bully me or treat me ill, and I didn't want to feel the incredible sadness that comes with that. And that's not to say that that wasn't done to Owen. I feel that me and Owen and how we reacted to being isolated are definitely a good example of how two ways that the road can diverge. Owen became bitter, resentful, angry. Um, but when he finally met Lewis, interacted with Lewis, and Lewis treated him with kindness, it opened up that wound of just desperately craving friendship and companionship and being treated with kindness. And that can create a relationship that becomes extremely codependent. And you can be codependent one-sidedly. Codependent doesn't necessarily mean that both people are reacting the same way. It can be one person being super dependent on another and the other person enabling that codependency. I think that's the thing that's important in situations where the codependency is not reciprocated. You can have codependency and have an enabler. And I don't feel that Lewis, as the character, was being an enabler, although it might be worth saying that because Lewis was also a vampire and spent most of his time in voluntary isolation rather than forced isolation, that there was definitely a sense of, I finally have someone that I can relate to as a person with a disease, who lives in isolation. We both now have someone that we can talk to, that someone that we can relate to, um, someone that we know will not judge us harshly, etc. So their relationship could have been codependent. We will never know because we never get Lewis's point of view. Lewis's character is fridged for Owen's character arc, and there's people who are familiar with the fridging of a character will already know all of the arguments and feelings and opinions on the matter, so I won't divulge into that too much. If you would like me to talk about that in the future, I will be happy to talk about it. It is definitely something that I have a lot of thoughts and opinions about. What's important to point out is, yes, the character was fridged for Owen's character's feelings to continue to manifest the way that they did. And because Owen already hated the townsfolk for his own, okay, I will define that for you, Sai, since you asked. Give me a second to thank you so much, Alan, for the bits. I appreciate you. Give me 1 second. Narrative trope. I want to make sure that I am presenting this. So these aren't my exact words, but I will discuss them correctly. If you go to tvtropes.org, you can look this up and read it personally, but I'm just going to read what they have because they did a good job. So when a loved one of the character is hurt, killed, maimed, assaulted, or otherwise traumatized in order to motivate another character or move their plot going forward. This is primarily done to women characters, for men characters, usually romantic, but not always so. Sometimes it's a sister or a mother or a close friend. It doesn't necessarily have to be romantic, but it sometimes oftentimes is. The term was popularized by the comic book writer Gail Simone. She had an entire essay / book called Women in Refrigerators. And the point of it being is it's a compiled list of instances where female characters were killed off as a plot device. A big example of this is one of the Green Lantern stories, which is A New Dawn, in which the villain Major Force leaves the corpse of Kyle Rayner's girlfriend, Alexandra DeWitt, stuffed into a refrigerator for him to find. So while not all characters who are fridged are literally put into a refrigerator for the character to find, it's the point of it being their death creates a narrative motive for the character. And their death often becomes a thing that requires revenge or avenging. And there's a difference between the two, revenge versus avenge, and we can talk about that later also. But that becomes a motivator for Owen. His lover, his friend, his mentor is killed, and because he already believed the townsfolk of Oakhurst were villainous people for how they treated him personally, the fact that they treated another person that he considered more important than even he was, horribly to the point of killing them, that he needed to avenge that character. He not only wanted to avenge that character, but also wanted revenge for the way that he had been treated. Very big, important things. Very big motivators for storytelling, and specifically for this character. And it made... I want to backtrack slightly because I didn't talk about it. I'm assuming people here haven't watched the SMP, so I have to give a little bit of backstory for anybody who has watched it and wants to, who and already know. Then feel free to tune out slightly. But Owen and Lewis, they have several. It is assumed to be several meetings. Who knows how long? But over the time of the meetings, they develop a relationship. And then Lewis presents to Owen, "You're sick. How would you like to not be sick anymore? You may never be able to interface with humanity, with community again, but you don't have to be sick anymore. How do you feel about that?" And Owen basically says, "I didn't like them anyway, but it would be nice not to be sick. And I think I would enjoy my life even more if I got to be sick, if I got to not be sick, but also spend more time with you." Which is one of the implications that their relationship was more than just friends. And they were roommates. No. So Lewis, I'm struggling to remember some of my big $5 words right now. Forgive me. Lewis divulges to Owen in the process of doing this for him that he's a vampire, and that's how he's going to be able to cure him of his disease. He's going to offer vampirism as the cure. And because vampirism is the cure, and it's being offered by the person he most appreciates, who finally gave him attention and companionship after so much time, so many years of isolation, Owen very quickly, he immediately feels frustration and pain and fear and personal hurt being done to him because of what is done to his partner, that he is Hang on. There we go. Sorry about that. Lost connection for a second. And of course, now there's an ad break. Of course. Hopefully. Okay, good. Connection lost for a second there. Sorry about that. Trying to backtrack. Give me a second. Kills everyone in town. But because he feels like ending his life would invalidate the gift Lewis gave him, he can't do it. But he does kind of give up. And that's where we see him bury himself, go into a catatonic state, basically. And he does this for, to him, an indeterminable amount of time, but what ultimately ends up being 200 years. Now, take into account the fact that he had literally just been turned. So he had barely got to really experience his gifts for the first time, to experience any of the draws and faults of his new abilities. He had learned some things before being turned, because it isn't really disclosed how long it took him to make that decision. I'm assuming personally that it was a very quick decision to make. But he didn't really get a lot of time to learn a lot. He didn't really get a time to experience a lot before it was all taken away from him. And then he wasn't really given any sort of idea what his gifts were. He doesn't, Owen, the creator, doesn't really use that as a spin. It's kind of implied that he already knows how to do all of these things, or that he has a pretty good idea how they work. He definitely knows what the hunger feels like. He definitely knows, as being a vampire, that he has to go and feed, etc., etc. But he is shown to have a natural affinity to his powers, and it doesn't come off as a learning curve thing at all, even though he's been asleep in a catatonic state for 200 years, or any of that. When he wakes up, he assumes the town to have been no longer occupied, because he killed everybody. It is implied that, there were people that maybe weren't present for that, but definitely escaped beforehand and went on to live outside of the town and continue familial lines, etc. Because a lot of the people who come to Oakhurst have direct lineage to people who had lived in Oakhurst. There's also a lot of people who come to Oakhurst having never been from Oakhurst at all. They've learned about it some way, and that's what brings them there altogether. And their presence in the surrounding area reactivates the beacons, which are a narrative plot point, acting as kind of like an enclosure around the space. I would liken it to like an electrified fence. The fence turns on, but it doesn't become electrified until the first beacon, the town beacon, is consecrated. And then it becomes electrified. Everybody who's in is stuck. Anybody outside can't enter, that sort of thing. A lot of that is never, at least in Owen's perspective, we never get to see him attempt to leave. We do see that in Apakuna's perspective. because Owen tells her at one point in the storyline that she can't leave, that everybody who is in, you're blurry, baby, so don't worry, okay? Everybody who is inside the Beacon's network, Owen tells her none of us can leave because we're inside. The only way out is to kill all the humans or turn all of the humans into vampires. That way they can desecrate the beacons. And as long as the beacons are all consecrated or desecrated, they can leave. If they are consecrated, it is extremely easy for the vampires to be permanently eliminated because their life force is significantly drained. In the mechanics of Minecraft, they go from having like 15 hearts all the way down to like 3 hearts, which means that if they are a level 1 vampire, it would be extremely easy for them to be knocked down to a half heart and then finished with a stake and then permanently killed. Permadeath. Permanent killed. In a story way, yeah, it's basically their life force gets drained to the point where they are extremely weak and they're easy to kill. Owen specifically is afraid, and that's what it is. It's fear. He is afraid that all humans want him dead because his lover was murdered. Whether or not it was because he was a vampire is unimportant. It's that his lover was murdered for being different. And because his lover was murdered for being different, that means that anybody will murder anything that is different. So he's afraid that as soon as the townsfolk find out that he is different, they will murder him. And his response to this, to put it loosely, is they can't murder me if I murder them first. And that's how he approaches the situation. He has no desire to be friends with anybody that are human. He is happy to feed off of them and to ultimately kill them. He really doesn't care one way or the other if anybody is going to be turned into a vampire. If they want to, that's great. They'll be on his side. But he doesn't really even care about that. He is more invested in making everyone else feel miserable, isolated, ostracized. That's his goal. He wants everybody else to feel all of the terrible, horrible feelings that he felt. That's his motivation. He wants to avenge the death of his lover, and he wants revenge for the way that he was treated. And he does not care, is not interested in anyone trying to present some sort of redeeming factor. Welcome back from ad break. Owen is willing to align himself with the other vampires insofar as they have the same core values that he has, or they don't get in his way. And he's willing, absolutely willing, to fall into the background in order to do what he wants, which is to kill everybody or make them feel ostracized. He doesn't necessarily need to be in front of everyone to do that. He doesn't need to be the focus on that. Just a moment, please. But then we come to see, in the course of things, him start to show those examples of wanting companionship, wanting friends, wanting found family, because he never had that. He has banter with Pyro. He has a couple different moments with Shelby that are genuinely friendly. We see an event play out in the story where Shelby is provided a plea from a townsfolk person, a towns member, to come back, even though she's a vampire. Owens finds this. He changes the sign. He takes away the plea, turns it into a threat on her life, removes the gift inside of the raw meat. He replaces it with a steak, a wooden steak, to be more specific, not an actual steak. In order to make her feel fearful, in order to make it appear like she's like I know one way of seeing it would be to say he's trying to make her feel ostracized. Yes, exactly. STAKE versus STEAK. Um, he's more than happy to do that because he wants her to feel ostracized, but also I personally feel, because of what he says, that he doesn't want to lose his connection with her and the other newly turned vampires. Um, the words he specifically says is, I just got this family and I don't want to lose it. Even though his mentor told him at some point or another that it wasn't common for vampires to form allegiances and alliances because a lot of them were purely self-motivated. They didn't work as a whole, and if they did, it was usually not very long. It was more of a safety and numbers thing rather than a community of people working towards the same goal. And his goal, as we already discussed, is primarily to avenge his lover's murder and take revenge on anyone who ever made him feel ostracized, either by making them feel ostracized or killing them. He's not really interested in developing relationships, even at least out loud. But you can tell by the way he responds to certain people that he is actually seeking those roles to be fulfilled, the friendships, etc. We go on to see that well displayed through his relationship with Dr. Lagundo. Initially, it's implied that Owen is most interested in turning Dr. Lagundo because he feels that, as being a doctor, a medical doctor, not only does he have the skill to heal people with his surgery, but also, now being a vampire, he has the ability to cure disease permanently. And Owen goes as far as to present that he doesn't have to do it with force, he can do it as an offer, which is essentially what happens to Lewis. Lewis cures Owen and presents him the choice of that. And I think it's worth pointing out, although we don't get to experience the point of view of Lewis, that anytime Lewis, I keep wanting to say Lois, anytime Lewis offers that gift to people, I'm assuming he doesn't do it very often, if at all. This might even be the first time he's ever offered it to anyone, but we don't know that because we don't get his point of view. But you have to assume that to present that as an offer is a great personal risk, which is probably why it's not the first thing he offers out the gate when he meets somebody. Lewis meets somebody. He does it after he's gotten to know the person, after he's more or less maybe enthralled them. It's not implied that Owen is Lewis's thrall, but the idea of vampiric thralls are presented in the story in Cleo's perspective, so that's worth pointing out. But as far as we're aware, Owen is never actually identified as being Lewis's thrall. But we have to take into consideration the fact that if anyone finds out that a character is a vampire, a person is a vampire, they come at a great personal risk during Owen's timeline to have been killed. That's most likely still the case in the present day timeline. But the people in this community are much more accepting on one perspective of vampires continuing to exist so long as no one is harmed. This is the kindness that is mostly offered to the town vampires versus the castle vampires. And Owen would classify himself as a castle vampire. That's how he separates himself. While he may not ever say it out loud, we are given that perspective through other point of views. He aligns himself with Scott. Scott is the castle vampire. Ergo, they don't want to live peacefully. They want to feed without discretion, indiscriminately, and not suffer any consequences for it, and be able to turn people if they want to without any sort of mutual agreement on whether or not the person is turned. Even Shelby mentions this to Owen at one point. She says, this gift was offered to you. We being the other town vampires, we have to just come to terms with it. It was done to us, and we have to live with that. We have to live with the consequences of that. None of the town vampires want to die. None of the town vampires are interested in necessarily turning or feeding from others. They are fully content on consuming animal blood and being more or less vegetarians for that. Owen will be vegetarian so long as he's forced to be so, but shows no remorse having to feed off of others, is very intent on getting the town vampires to fully convert over to being a castle vampire and to feed indiscriminately, etc. And encourages them to do so. Maybe because he wants more people on his side. Maybe because he wants that the my friend Blackcloud is missing some rich vampire lore. This is specifically vampire lore associated with the vampires SMP. I wouldn't necessarily say it is universal vampire lore, but there's definitely some universal vampire lore that is applied to the story. Anyway, coming back. He wants everybody to be us versus them. It's not let's all survive together. It's let's all pick a side. I'm not even going to address how that can be queer coded, because it could absolutely be queer coded, but we're not going to touch that right now. We'll touch that a different time. So there's a lot of conflicting interactions for Owen with the townsfolk and with other vampires about, do I want these people to be my family, or do I want these people to feel ostracized like me and feel like they have no other choice than to be my family? Do I even want a family? Am I fine with being alone? Everything that I've ever loved and wanted has been taken away from me. All I want is for everybody to suffer the way I've suffered, everybody to feel the way I feel, the remorse, the anger, all of that, the grief, all of it. That's what Owen claims is his only motivation, but I feel like he's lying to himself about it. He does have other motivation. And you kind of see little glimpses of that in the earlier scenarios. He says at one point at the very beginning of his story, I fear what I might become. He shows the feelings about wanting Shelby and the other vampires to be his family, his friends. He doesn't want to be alone again. It feels good to have these connections, these allegiances with people. But as soon as people start to, quote unquote, show their true colors, he's very easy to revert back to his old ways, to choose isolation this time, even after being cured of his disease, of leprosy or plague or whatever it was. Yeah, those things are gone now, but he's still diseased with the vampirism. He's still considered an outcast. He still has something to be afraid of, being rejected, being killed, etc. So they're like warring motivations at all times. Dr. Lagundo presents a third option, which is stay the way you are, continue to be the way you are, but get rid of this us versus them mentality and try to coexist and heal and grow and no longer suffer and be full of remorse and guilt and regret. Owen doesn't want to do that. He doesn't. He's stuck in his trauma. It's very difficult for him to escape this trauma. He's still, to him, it's still fresh, even though it's been 200 years. And part of that has to do with the thought loops that were constantly, constantly going in his head over the course of the 200 years. He never let himself recover from that trauma. And he is still living it as if it were happening to him in that moment. And he is suffering from the survivor's guilt that comes from losing a loved one. It's so compounding and it's so intense and it's so difficult for him to even try to get past it. It's intrinsically linked into his character's entire being, his core beliefs, his core values, his identity, all of it. It doesn't matter that there's a possibility that he could be accepted and treated kindly. It's his entire being. In fact, when Dr. Lagundo presents it as, you don't have to stay this way. We can find a cure for vampirism. You could potentially no longer be diseased and human again. But Owen now feels like the vampirism is intrinsically linked to Lewis. And because it's intrinsically linked to Lewis, who is now dead, he can't ever not be who he is, because it means letting go of Lewis. And that fear of having the one person that he finally felt accepted, he finally felt let him exist as he was, who wanted to be involved in his life regardless of whether or not he was diseased, who treated him with kindness, who treated him with respect, who wanted his companionship. All of that will be ripped from him violently, which is so incredibly sad, because you see over and over and over, specifically from Dr. Lagundo, that he will not force Owen to choose this. He says it repeatedly. Even during their biggest confrontation, he says, I won't force you. You have to choose to do it, but think about it. Consider it. But it's almost like Owen chooses not to hear that. He hears, you don't have to be this anymore. And instead of, it's your choice, it's, you're going to take this from me by force. Which may be tied to his desire to ostracize others. He wants to do it by force. So obviously people are going to do things to him by force. And he will not be forced to let go of his trauma. He will not be forced to let go of Lewis. So he reacts violently and lashes out at Lagundo and won't stop lashing out at Lagundo, even after Lagundo goes through the additional attempts of showing repeatedly that he is safe for Owen to be around and that he understands what Owen is feeling, as though he were ostracized, as though he were a monster. That term very specifically gets brought up several different times. Shelby chooses not to be a monster because she wants to be vegetarian, because she doesn't want to turn people, because she wants to live without causing harm. She is still a vampire, but she is also a vampire keeping their humanity. The same can be said about Apo. Apo is a vampire who wants to stay linked to her humanity. She is on the side of humanity no matter what. Pearl, as a human, only wants to fight and hunt people who cause unmitigated harm to others, be they vampires, werewolves, humans, whatever. She only cares about making sure that humanity is safe. And this is the part where I'm going to get into some more spoilery parts because, as I mentioned, the series has come to an end. So if you haven't finished the series and you don't want to be spoiled, put your fingers in your ears, go la 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 la. I'm going to try very hard to discuss these things without giving too much of the plot away. But if you want to watch stuff, point of views about it, you can go to YouTube and type in vampiressmp or VSMP. You can go to Lugundo's point of view. You can go to Orange Juice TV. You can go to Apakuno. You can go to any of the content creator cast characters content and look at it and follow their points of view. There's some pretty great ones, to put it mildly. What it comes down to for Owen is he would rather stay a vampire and possibly die as a vampire with the hopes of possibly reconnecting with Lewis in the afterlife than to give up his gift, to try to continue to live without his partner, to choose to heal and recover from the trauma of his life. He would rather keep all of those things and die with the hope of reconnecting with the one person who showed him any sort of kindness, under the assumption that all vampires are damned beings who will all end up in the same place. He only ends up getting pushback against that idea from Lagundo and Abolish. Lagundo presents it to him first with the quote of, "I've seen vampires who are more human than some of the best humans I know. I've seen humans, monstrous humans." Sorry, I'm taking a second to try and recollect my thoughts. He says this to Owen at least twice, but it's almost as if Owen can't hear it because he's more consumed with the idea of having Lagundo be not necessarily a replacement for Lewis, but a copy of him, a person that he can project his thoughts and feelings onto, who holds the same levity that Lewis had. Lewis was the mayor of Oakhurst. He was a prominent figure. He was a healer. He was a good man. And Dr. Lagundo could be all of these things. The difference is between Lagundo and Lewis is that we never get to learn whether or not Lewis had done bad things in his past, had things that he regretted, had things that could have been perceived as contributing to the status quo of negative repercussions on the world. Owen sees Lewis as a martyr, as a person on a pedestal who can do no wrong because he's only done good things for Owen. And he's so locked into a perpetual state of infatuation, obsessive love, liminence, all of those things. We never get him under the microscope the same way that we get Lagundo. And Lagundo openly admits to having done bad things. Lagundo has regrets because of things that he did while he was in the military, that he did because he was ordered to do them. We don't know if, well, we can assume, based on what we know about military bodies, that if he refused the order, he could have been um, discharged. He could have been um, jailed. He could have been killed for refusing an order. Those were all possibilities. And even more so, if he had been drafted, what would have happened if he had refused to be drafted? Um, would he have been forced to do it? Would he have been threatened? Had people around him threatened? Put him in a situation where he had no other choice? It was either do the things he was ordered to do or die. And he regrets everything he's done. He considers himself a monster for everything he has done. And for good reason. They go against his core values. They go against his core beliefs. They go against what he wanted himself to be. And he feels the same kind of survivor's guilt that Owen feels, where he has to live with these horrible things that happened. Some of them he didn't choose. He was forced to do. He didn't choose to do them. He was given the false impression of choice. And because he had to do it, he's stuck with the memory and the regret and the guilt and the shame that comes with that. And he makes that comment a couple different times, I killed people. I was good at it. They gave me a medal for it. I chose to be a doctor. I chose to take the vows to do no harm. I don't want to continue to leave that blemish on the world and on myself. I did my time. I repent and then I die, and the world will be better for it. He doesn't deserve eternity. These are all his thoughts. He doesn't deserve eternity because he has not done anything good to deserve eternity. And even if given the opportunity to heal people with vampirism, it's not going to change the trauma, the guilt, the shame, the remorse for the lives that he had to take while he was in the military in his lifetime. He feels personally like he will never be able to move past that trauma if he were forced to live forever. The parallels there are so big, so intense. They're so obvious. They both share that sense of I have to live with this for as long as I have to. I have no choice. In Lagundo's case, he's trying to repent, but I think even if he saved as many lives or even double the lives that he had to end, it still wouldn't be enough. It will never be enough to make up for the fact that he had to make that choice. He had to do those deeds. And he didn't choose to be jailed or be discharged or potentially die. He chose to live and make bad choices. And he regrets that choice. Owen chose to continue to be alive / undead rather than to invalidate Lewis's gift. He doesn't regret killing all of the people that he had to kill, that he chose to kill. He regrets that he had to make that choice. but he doesn't regret the people that he killed. Those are the biggest differences between their two characters. Owen wants Lagundo to be like Lewis. And maybe if he is like Lewis, he can continue to exist in the world and maybe heal. But you see again that codependency there. He can't do this by himself. He needs to have someone else to help him heal. And if you look at that purely from a psychological perspective, I think you can say that about most people who are trying to recover from their trauma. It's very difficult for them to do it by themselves. They seek additional people to help them. They need those people to help them. But you can't expect someone to help who does not want to help or who can't help for whatever reason. We got another ad break coming in. Make sure that you get a drink. Make sure that you're getting up and stretching, all of those fun things. I'm going to step away really quickly so that I can get some water. My mouth is starting to get dry. I will be right back. Don't go anywhere unless you're in an ad, in which case, please go somewhere and I'll see you back in a second. Putting myself on mute for a moment. I really wish I knew where my electric kettle was so that I could have water on for tea and not have to worry about the whistle interrupting me, because I would absolutely do that if I could. As it is right now, I will just drink water and it will be fine. Welcome back from the ads. I might still make tea even with the whistle on, because I would really like some tea. Anyway. Lagundo, I love Lagundo's character about as much as I love Owen's character, but maybe a little more because of how much I do deserve tea. Thank you, Allie. I love Lagundo's character maybe more than Owen's character because of the fact that Lagundo so desperately wants to make up for his wrong choices. He doesn't want to continue to make bad choices and live wrongfully. He doesn't do it out of a sense of obligation. He does it because morally he feels it's the right thing to do. And maybe in doing so, he can leave the world better than he found it. Better than he left it. Or chose to leave it initially in his life. He's had more life to live. He actively lived the whole time he's been alive, while Owen went into catatonic state for 200 years and never lived past the age of 25 mentally. So Lagundo has had more time to reflect on his choices, to make active attempts to be better, to do better, and maybe not actively heal from his bad choices, but at least passively do so by knowing that he's done good deeds. Being a surgeon, being a doctor, always thinking about others before himself. We do trace back on that tendency towards martyrdom, him saying to himself, maybe not in the most blunt way, but I don't matter, others matter, and I can only be as good as I am useful. And he does go on to say that near the end of his story arc. As long as I'm useful, I can keep going. As soon as I stop being useful, I might as well be dead. I don't want to continue to live. And while Owen presented the idea of him being permanently useful by being a vampire and being able to cure other people, it's not the usefulness that Lagundo can, what's the word I want to use? Endorse. It's not worth the risk of succumbing to the vampiric tendencies to feed and to become animalistic and to prey on others. He already feels that he's done enough of that and he doesn't want to risk that for the rest of his existence. That could be a real thing that happens. You can see that with people who have dealt with addiction in their lives. You don't want to put an alcoholic in the middle of a brewery because you're basically setting them up for failure. Lagundo had to kill people, and to give him the ability to kill people again would be like to give an alcoholic a bottle of scotch and be like, do what you will with this. He can only abstain from his bad choices by making good choices. And that's really hard. And that's why his story arc ending the way it did is so difficult. And he tries desperately to help Owen choose to begin the process of healing his grief and his sorrow and his suffering by making good choices. They both want the same thing for each other that they themselves can't fully achieve alone by themselves. Lagundo wants Owen to recover from his life and make good deeds and good choices. And to help him to do so would reflect on himself, Lagundo himself, that he was able to save another person, that he was able to help another person save others. Whereas Owen wants Lagundo to be the savior that Lewis was, to save other people, and he wants to be the one who helps him choose that, which will give him a permanent companion that will fulfill all of the things that Lewis began to fulfill with him in order to finally experience the good things he had been hoping for and wanting with Lewis. Again, not wanting to replace Lewis, but to continue where he was going in his life with the same sort of influences on it. Kind of a, maybe this is a bad analogy, but kind of like treating a hangover by adding hair to the dog. Does that make sense? I hope that makes sense. Like I said, maybe it's a bad analogy. Either way, neither of them will give each other what they want, but neither of them will also actively take away the choice to be that. So they're locked in a standstill, and it's just about whether or not the bridge underneath them will will be stable or will collapse. I think it's worth noting, without spoiling the story too much, that the bridge does collapse. And it's okay that it collapses because it was always meant to. That was the story that the authors, that the cast wanted to provide to the consumer, to the audience, to the reader. That's what they wanted to share. It is meant as a cautionary tale. Don't do this. Here's an example why. History will repeat itself. The only way to do better is to see the worst outcome and know that this is how you avoid it. This is how you can continue to do better and be better. They both suffer from survivor's guilt. They both suffer from shame and regret and remorse and fear. They are all experiencing the same repercussions for different situations, obviously, but they all are experiencing humanity in that way. Yes, it's sad that there's no redemption. Yes, it's sad there's no happy ending. There wasn't ever meant to be. And that's okay in a story. Because these are not real people. These are not real events. They aren't meant to replace those events. They're meant to, like I just said, cautionary tale, etc. There's one additional character that I wanted to tie into all of this, and that was the character of Avid. Because I feel like Avid is the wild card, but has parts of both Lagundo and Owen, while also still being himself, while also still being his own character. I think Avid is all the worst parts of both characters. He's extremely fearful. He's extremely aggressive. He's extremely dedicated to avenging the death of his partner, to seeking revenge for the ones that did her wrong. But he also wants to save everybody. He also wants to make sure that no one else feels the things that he feels. And he will force them to make sure that they are safe and protected and that they don't have these things that happen to them too. He will go out of his way to he will go out of his way by any means necessary to make sure that nobody else suffers. And because you cannot force someone to make a choice they're not ready to make, you will fail. He does fail, and he gets cornered and put into a situation where he has to make a choice to continue to live or to succumb to the worst parts of himself and become the monster. And that's exactly what he does. In a moment of fear, he reaches out to Shelby, to Shovel's character, and asks her to help prevent him from succumbing to the feral beast behind the curtain, under the hood, if you will. But when he is healed, when he does convert to vampirism, he takes everything he had as the fearful human trying to save and protect everyone that he can, and flips it completely over And now that he has friends that he had before, they're all on the same side again. He can kill everyone. He can end everyone and save everyone. He just has to be willing to kill everyone that gets in his way, which he has and he does want to do actively. Problem is that he can't because he's a wimp. Um, he has the monster mentality, but he also has the mob mentality. He is part of the he cannot exist alone. He has to be part of a larger group of people because alone he can't do anything. Um, he feels that's his biggest weakness. He lost his partner because he wasn't able to protect her. So he, of course, now has to protect everyone. And when he can't protect everyone, he'll go to the other side. And instead of protecting everyone, he'll go after everyone. He'll be the thing everyone was originally afraid of. But he's not very good at it. So he still is fearful and afraid and scared and just can't pull it off. And you see his remorse and his guilt and his shame for not being able to be as strong as everyone else, to save everyone, to be the protector that he desperately wants to be. But he also, again, like I said, he reflects parts of both. Lagundo sees Avid as being a mockery of his character, his core values, everything that he believes about himself. Avid plays doctor, but Lagundo is a doctor. Likewise with Owen, Avid plays a vampire, but Avid is not actually a vampire. And in both cases, they will not put up with it anymore. Uh, Lagundo puts faith and trust into Avid only for Avid to betray him and rob his trust and absolutely undermine everything that he's been trying to do. Owen feels that Avid is his antithesis. Um, Owen chose to be a vampire. Avid chose vampirism as a last resort, but he didn't want to stay a vampire. He initially is absolutely ready to take the cure as soon as it's available, but as soon as he sees that it'll go against his core beliefs, he's like, never mind. I'll just stick with it. It's fine. Um, and instead throws his entire weight and his entire chest behind um, making sure to fulfill the mob mentality of the vampires, the castle vampires specifically, rather than do what Apo decides to do, which is to stay human, to maintain humanity, and to fight with the townsfolk. Apo could have gone full castle vampire like Shelby and Pyro did, but she chose to maintain humanity and to save humanity from attack and all of those things, even at great personal risk of herself, although she's constantly fearful of that. She wants to get back to her person. She does not want to stay there. She'll do whatever she can, but oh my god, please let her do that. Leave her alone while she tries. Avid Avid wants to avenge Elle, but he doesn't necessarily want to incite revenge for himself. He doesn't really know what happened to himself. He has a lot of assumptions, but he doesn't know for sure. He just knows that he can't let what happened to Elle happen to anyone else that he cares about. And he wants to protect other people. Owen didn't want to protect other people. Owen wanted to be accepted and allowed to live his life the way he wanted to live it. Avid was more than happy to force everyone into the same box as him and even do so by force. He's also really quick to have changes of heart, specifically in cases with Shelby. When Shelby isn't willing to come back to town, um, he gives up on her initially. He reacts hastily. He burns her house down. He gives up to a fit of passion and sobs and cries and bemoans the fact that Shelby is happy the way Shelby is and doesn't want to come back to being a human and doesn't want to have him in her life if he is going to potentially put her new friends and family at risk. Um, in those ways, there is some parallel between Avid and Owen because Owen also wants to force everybody into a similar box, and he's not willing to give up his core values and opinions and beliefs. He will do everything he can to make people feel the way he wants them to feel, the same way that Avid will do everything he can to make everybody feel the way that he wants and is feeling. That's why Owen finds so much disgust and disdain and just zero interest in Avid as a person. Avid is a foil. Avid needs to be stopped. Avid talks way too much, and Avid needs to be eliminated. Final thought. After Avid betrays Lagundo and continues to show and prove that he cannot be trusted, Lagundo washes his hands of him. He's done with Avid's antics. He doesn't see the point of trying to make Avid turn back because Avid will never behave rationally the way Lagundo values. Lagundo deeply values rational thinking and will go to great lengths to provide rational thought to people who are maybe getting stuck in their fits of passion and overthought and all of that. Um, what was the other thing? There were additional things I wanted to point out about Avid specifically. Um, Avid, out of the three of them, I would say, is probably the least mentally and emotionally mature. He's still, Owen even points it out to him, he's a kid. He's just a kid. But at the same time, Owen forces the narrative of you will always revert back to your tendencies and you can't be trusted and you need to be taken out because you're a liability and you're a threat, and you're not only are you a threat to one side, but you are a threat to both sides. Nobody can take you. You are the perfect ostracized being. You're exactly like me. He doesn't say or admit to the last one, but he sure as hell acts on it. My God, does he act on it. And Lagundo doesn't find himself as redeemable, but he does everything he can to prove that he regrets what he's done. Avid does not. Avid has no regrets. Avid acts wildly and impulsively and is the antithesis of everything that Lagundo believes about himself. And Lagundo is perfectly happy to revert to the ways of eliminating a threat. And he regrets that immediately, which is why he doesn't go on to further pursue Avid. he tries to get back onto the path he had been previously on. Owen doesn't feel the same feelings that Lagundo does. And that's another one of those examples of um, wanting the other to be the same as themselves. And they call each other hypocrites. Lagundo literally calling Owen a hypocrite, but Owen also feeling like Lagundo is kind of a hypocrite. At this point, and you can actually, coming back to that, because Owen has been given implication that Lagundo has monstrous tendencies, but is allowed to live among other people, innocent people, the way he wasn't himself allowed to be, even though Owen himself did not have, in his opinion, monstrous qualities prior to choosing vampirism. He feels that Lagundo shouldn't be allowed to continue to live peacefully. He goes out of his way to figure out what Lagundo did that makes him such a monster. And while previously he considered Lagundo to be similarly idealistic to Lewis, as soon as he sees that Lagundo has made terrible moral, oh no, not again. There we go. I really wish it would stop doing that. I think it's a server problem. As soon as Owen realizes that what Lagundo is capable of, and that he's allowed to be among the humans, even though he's made these choices, while Owen himself hasn't been allowed to, he makes it his mission to make Lagundo be the monster. Yeah, I want to joke and say it's Mercury or something, but that joke. Anyway, um, so that's what Owen does. Owen goes out of his way. Owen very intentionally reveals Lagundo, pulls him into the darkness against his will, which goes against Lewis's core values. Owen makes the worst choice, an irredeemable choice, by forcing Lagundo to be the worst part of himself, for Lagundo to submit to the worst parts of himself, and Owen chooses not to live with the repercussions of that, which is cowardly. He even calls Lagundo a coward by being a poisoner, but then ultimately does that very thing. He poisons Lagundo, and then rather than repent for it and try to do better and try to be better, he chooses instead to give up. and doesn't even see the results of that. Lagundo and Owen's choices deeply affected the narrative. Because of Lagundo wanting to save all the vampires and make good and repent and have everybody come back to the light, he stops a lot of the townsfolk from actively pursuing and trying to end the lives of the vampires. Because Owen is so bloodthirsty and so devilish and so intent on ostracizing everyone, all of the vampires are put in that mindset of us versus them, of kill or be killed, of pursuing the deaths of the townsfolk in order to fully embrace that darkness. Avid's death, sorry, spoilers. Avid's character arc ending makes some of the town vampires who were considering converting to castle vampires to pursue that darkness falter in their decision. Even the prime sire lead castle vampire has second thoughts. And there's an ad break. For anybody who's still here or is about to enter the ad break, just go ahead and get yourself a sip of water. Go ahead and give yourself a quick little stretch. Go get a snack if you need a snack. Take some meds if you haven't taken the meds you need to take. It's only for 90 seconds, so come on, go and do it. Oh boy. I'm really hoping that I'm not just being a fan that's just like rabbling about what I liked and didn't like. I feel like a lot of what I'm talking about right now is a little bit more based in like analysis and theory and the word that I still can't remember. Ethics? I think that might be it. Because there's good ethics, there's bad ethics. That's the whole point of ethics, is figuring out what that is. Yeah, I think it is ethics. I think that is the word that I've been struggling to remember this entire time. Was ethics. These are the things I learned how to do having taken my degree, and what I enjoy about literary analysis and stuff, story analysis and all that stuff. Welcome back from the ads. Okay, so the vampires have a change of heart because of the end of Owen's, thank you, Ezzy, because of the end of Avid's storyline, and it's directly being because of Owen's choices. Suddenly, the idea of killing or being killed is less appealing. The humans find themselves having the best of themselves robbed from them with the loss of Lagundo. And for a minute, Lagundo genuinely shows the potential for backsliding into those tendencies of a easiness to kill. And it's only because, and he only falls into that because Owen invokes that out of him. Owen presents him with the bottle of scotch. And Lagundo takes a big gulp. And when he goes back to town, still holding that bottle, ready and willing and able to take another gulp, it's only because of town's members like Cleo and Pearl and Abolish, who point out that he doesn't need to, and who hold their hands out for the bottle, and who remind him it's okay that you fell off the wagon. We don't hate you. We don't scorn you. We won't throw you aside because you've made such efforts to do your best. You can lean on us. Give us back the bottle. You're a good doctor. You're a good man. He refuses to admit that. He won't let people try and convince him that he's a good man because of all of the bad things he's done. And he's locked into that mindset of, I can be useful. I'm only as good as I am useful. I've had everything that I can do taken away from me, and now I have to be this creature, and there's nothing I can do. Just please let me be useful for as long as I can be useful. And the vampires, the castle vampires say to Lagundo, you don't have to do that. You don't have to be the monster. As monsters ourselves, we've come to realize that we can choose to be better because of your example. Let us show you we can be better. That your repentance has been seen and that it has inspired us to repent and to make better choices. And collectively, without Owen there, perpetuating darkness and violence, they actively choose, all of them, the town vampires, the castle vampires, and the remaining humans, they choose to step into the light. There are unfortunate casualties on all sides, and while Owen's character doesn't get the redemption that everyone believes him to have earned, he didn't choose to be redeemable. And that's sad and depressing, and we can all feel horribly bad. But at the end of the day, it was what he chose. And we are reminded that our choices impact our lives and impact the lives of others, whether we want it to or not. Lagundo, having spent so much of his time trying to be a redeemable character, a redeemable person, having had his choices removed, ultimately realizes that there's nothing more he can do. He is as useful as he believes himself to be, and now he's no longer needed. He's willing to sacrifice himself for others. He becomes the martyr, and that is his end. We don't get any sort of resolution about his choices after he's gone from his perspective, the way we do with Owens, but it can be assumed that because of his intense desire to do and be good, that he may have found relief At least I choose to believe that. I want to believe that he found relief, even after having slid off. But I can't say that's what actually happens. I can only hope. The town collectively makes the choice to be better. They allow the briefest moment of darkness, but ultimately, at the end of it all, they all choose to stay in the light. And that's the ending that we get. And I think that is a lovely story. We've learned so much about just these three characters. But because of these three characters and their choices and their beliefs and their values, so much of the story is shaped and affected by their decisions. And it wasn't a case of they all collectively sat together and were like, these are our main characters. No. And it wasn't even that they had what the internet affectionately calls main character syndrome. It just so happens that because of the way they had intrinsically linked themselves to the lives of everybody around them, that is what comes from it. Their choices drive the narrative and help shape the story, and we get the endings we do because of their character arcs and their stories. We get good endings for everyone else, even though their characters' endings perhaps weren't the best. And that was what made it such a compelling story for me. Like, I am just so impressed from beginning to end by the amazing storytellers, the cast of characters, the content creators that made this material. I don't even know if they're analyzing their own work the way that I just got done doing for the past 2 hours, 2-ish hours. I don't even know if they've done that more so, I mean, outside of maybe building character backstories and stuff like that, which, I mean, admittedly, you do a lot of analysis of your own character. You find out what their motivations are, you find out what their vices are, etc., by creating these backstories. But while the story itself was unfolding, they weren't probably thinking about these uh, ethics questions and personality things and stuff in the moment. They were just living the moment. They were acting improvisational, and that's a very important thing about improvising. You have to think in the moment. You're not thinking too far ahead. You're not overthinking necessarily, especially in cases like a survival multiplayer where you literally are trying to survive. Um, so you are deeply all of your choices and motivations are deeply affected by the fact that you could die at any second. There are active murderers trying to kill you. There are active murderers trying to kill your partners, your friends, the people that you are shoulder to shoulder with. So if you want them to live, you have to protect them too. And you're saying stuff and you're thinking stuff and you're feeling stuff in that moment that are deeply shaped by all of those things, values, motivations, etc. But then you're not going to spend 2 hours after the fact sitting there and thinking about your choices and all of the ways that they affect everything and everyone around you. I dare say that most people don't think that deeply. Some people do. I think those are the people that have anxiety disorders and personality disorders and stuff like that. Cheers to those people, myself included. It was just such great storytelling is what it came down to for me. I really enjoyed it. And I am gonna go and probably watch everybody's point of views because I want the whole story. The only problem I have with multiple stories is the multiple perspectives is trying to keep the story like chronological. That's why ensemble storytelling can be hard for me to follow sometimes. I usually only really commit to one or two storylines, even if I am reading everybody's storyline. So works like um, oh my god, I'm trying to remember all of the examples, and they've all flown out of my head at the same time. Orange is the New Black ensemble cast. Steven Universe, mostly Steven, but overall an ensemble cast. Um, Game of Thrones ensemble cast with a couple characters that people repeatedly come back to, but everybody it's still an ensemble all together. Um, Supernatural is an example of a storytelling thing that slowly becomes an ensemble cast, but still really deeply connects mostly with the two main characters. Um, there aren't a whole lot of episodes of Supernatural that are mainly focused on the ensemble cast. And if there the few that are is either still about them or were used as backdoor pilots that didn't actually take off. Sad to say. Um, but there was another show that I watched when I was still in college. I'm struggling to remember what it was. It was kind of a superhero-based one, but they were kind of like I wanna go as far as to say anti-heroes. Give me just a second to, see if I can remember what it's called. I'm gonna be asking the Google machine real quick. Oh my god. Misfits was such a for as long as I watched it. It did kind of go off the rails, when the original cast started dropping away, in my opinion. But the first few seasons, I especially enjoyed, especially Robert Sheehan's character. I loved Robert Sheehan's character. He was my favorite. Oh my god, he was my favorite. Maybe I'll talk about Misfits later. But yeah, that's roughly 2 hours of me yapping about Vampires SMP and the point of views of the characters that I mostly followed the all the way through. Um, if you have any questions on my thoughts and feelings and opinions on the matter, feel free to ask them, but don't feel like you have to continue the discussion if you're not really interested in it. Um, I just really wanted to share my thoughts and feelings about it. I had been, like I said, I'd been thinking and thinking and thinking about it for the last couple of days after the finale happened, and over the course of the time that I was watching it, just really deeply thinking about all of the characters and their motivations and just why I enjoyed their stories so much. I love stories. I wonder why. It's is it surprising given my name? All of that stuff, like, ugh, and I've also been having a lot of conversations that fall into the same vein offline with my spouse and with a couple of my friends of some of the things that I really enjoyed about, like, 90s entertainment and stories and stuff, and, um, movies and books that maybe don't get the same kind of appreciation as I personally feel they deserve. Um, and I've been wanting to yap so much about them and not really having an outlet, so I'm coming back for that. Hopefully sticking around for it too. Um, but yeah, not really sure where to continue after all of that. I can yap a little bit about life stuff, but I don't really have a lot to report that I haven't already more or less talked about one way or another. So, if nobody has anything else to say, I suppose I can find someone for us to read into. Give me a minute. How has everybody else been doing? What has everybody else been up to? I am equally interested in all of your lives. Make no mistake. Of course, there are some of you who I'm fully engrossed into the lives of, so I already know what's going on with you, but you're welcome to tell me whatever's new. Anything that's been happening today or yesterday if we haven't spoken since then. Or I know specifically with Yazzie, I've been seeing you all over the place in other streams, but we haven't really done a whole lot of talking. Casey just went live playing Call of the Lamb. You're settling in for Graveyard Keeper. Okay, maybe we'll raid into Casey. I want to see who else is live really quickly, but let's say let's assume that that's where we end up going. Why is the app so awful? Golly geez. I want to thank Ellen for rating us once again. I've been working on a project in the background. Awesome. Azzy, I hope we get to see it soon. I'm interested to see it. Oh, it looks like Drift is live. I don't know if Drift would let me raid into her. Oh, it looks like Fox Gray is live too. Oh, and Lagundo is live too. Look at all these amazing people who are live right now. Endora is live. Dark Thoughts is live. I kind of want to raid into... Let me see if it will let me. If it doesn't, that's okay. No, you know what? No. I'm going to introduce y'all to Fox because Fox is great. I found Fox because he was streaming The Long Dark, which is a game that I really love because of the narrative of that particular game. And he's just a great guy. So, please go and say hi to Fox from me. And I will see you all next time. Take care. Remember to give your animal friends a hug and kiss from me. And I will see you all next time.